Well, hello there. It is Monday evening. Time for a 49ers update. We can call this the 49ers week in review as well. But the 49ers have made a change and a hire at the scouting level, which I think is really important to highlight. I don't think a lot of people will be highlighting this, but somebody commented, I believe it was Spencer Coakley, who's a regular viewer. He said that scouts are the motor oil of an organization, and that they are. The 49ers have promoted Josh Williams to be their director of scouting. Josh Williams has been with this organization for nearly 13 years. He's risen up the scouting ranks. Now, the reason that the director of scouting job is open is that Tariq Ahmad and RJ Gillen were promoted to directors of player personnel. The 49ers have two directors of player personnel. That is a position that opened up when Adam Peters left to become the general manager of the Washington Commanders. So they had the director of college scouting, Tariq Ahmad, and the director of pro scouting, RJ Gillen. Both did a good job. Good organizations promote from within. The 49ers promoted both of these guys to director of player personnel. And to fill the void now, it's not a director of college scouting. It's not a director of pro scouting. It is just a director of scouting. San Francisco has promoted Josh Williams, who has been with this organization since around 2010, 2011. That is a really important detail about the way that the 49ers run, by the way. And when I've talked to John Lynch about this and how the 49ers are constructed, he really hammers this point home. A lot of the 49ers scouts were with this team from before, from the Trent Baalke era. And in 2017, when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over, they had the option to completely clean house and bring in all of their own people. But they recognized that the 49ers had a lot of scouting talent in the building, and they made sure to keep a lot of that scouting talent. Now, some of those guys that were with this team before, like Ethan Waugh, they've left for promotions elsewhere. Somebody like Rand Carthon, who's been with this team for a long time, he obviously left for a promotion elsewhere. He is now the GM of the Tennessee Titans. Adam Peters joined the 49ers with John Lynch in 2017. He's now the GM of the Washington Commanders. But Josh Williams, who was just promoted to that director of scouting, he's been with the 49ers all the way back into that Baalke era, nearly 13 years of employment. So when you try to build a good organization, a healthy workplace, you want to reward your own. You want to give people the hope and the incentive behind being able to advance within the organization. You can't just bring in outside people for every single job, because then your own people won't be incentivized to perform at their very best. So the 49ers, we saw it with Nick Sorensen. We saw it earlier with Mike McDaniel when he was promoted to the offensive coordinator. Sorensen, now the defensive coordinator. But the 49ers have been really big at hiring from within in both the coaching staff and within the scouting department, which obviously is helmed by John Lynch, the general manager. And Josh Williams is the latest promotion to the director of scouting for the 49ers. He played wide receiver at Columbia back in the day. Ivy League guy, has done some Stanford Graduate School business stuff. There was like a football leadership summit. It's on his resume in 2022. We actually found out about this promotion through LinkedIn. One of those inside the NFL accounts tweeted that according to Josh Williams' LinkedIn, he is now the 49ers director of scouting. And indeed, if you go to Josh Williams' LinkedIn in March of 2022, March of 2024, this year, 2 months ago this year, he did accept that job. That's right around the time that Tariq Ahmad and RJ Gillen were promoted to directors of player personnel. Other news, this came across Twitter just a little bit ago. The 49ers have hired Ryan Shuda. He was with Wake Forest to replace Jack Quagliarello. That was a scouting assistant job. So this is obviously lower on the pecking order, but the 49ers have welcomed a new member to the scouting department. But I do think that it's really important to report on this kind of stuff, because it is the scouts who discovered Brock Purdy at 262. John Lynch came on the Pat McAfee show about a week ago and described how the 49ers did discover Brock Purdy. You might recognize the name Slowick, Bobby Slowick, now the offensive coordinator for the D'Amico Ryans in Houston, used to be the pass game coordinator for the 49ers. His brother, Steve Slowick, is a scout for the 49ers in that Iowa region, and it turns out that he's the one that discovered Brock Purdy. So have a listen to this.
Way to set me up for success. But no, like You always, I think the people you don't hear about, the unsung heroes, like in these organizations, and that's, to me, it's our scouts, it's our coaches, and I think two people deserve so much credit for Brock Purdy, and one of them now is in our pro department. He's a guy by the name of Steve Slowick. His brother's Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator down there in Houston. But Steve was the college scout that would go through Iowa State, and we thought Brock might come out into the league the year before. We had high grades on him, actually a little higher his junior year than his senior year. But Steve was a guy who had the benefit of going into that school, hearing Matt Campbell, who did such a great job at Iowa State turning that program around. And Steve would always come during these draft meetings, in the fall meetings, in the draft meetings, and just speak so glowingly about Brock and the culture changer he was. How Iowa State would not be where they're at without Brock Purdy. And Steve was seeing it with his own eyes, but he was also telling us what Matt Campbell was saying. And Matt Campbell had been, there's good recommenders, and Matt had always proven to be a really good recommender. When he believed in a guy, it usually translated. And so Steve was very integral in that process. The other guy I'd say was Brian Greasy. Brian was incredibly impressed once we kind of gave Brian to him and said, hey, get on these Zooms, start talking to Brock. And Greasy came back extremely convicted. And then it's in Kyle's hands, it's in my hands, and we start watching. And we were so smart, we waited till the very last pick to draft him. And thank God he was there. He's been tremendous for our organization. And you really could see it right away. I think he was fourth on our depth chart. And there's a corny saying that people say, about training camp, and like, don't count your reps, make your reps count. And the one thing we saw about Brock, he'd get like 3 or 4 reps a practice when we first started. But man, he didn't come in and just play it safe. He was ripping it in windows that were small and doing so with confidence. That's a hard thing to do, because it's an easy way to get run right out of here when you're the last pick in the draft and you're trying to make these bold plays. But he just played with a confidence, a poise. And you start seeing that, then it's like Kyle says, well, let's give him 6 reps, and then let's give him 8 and 10. And
So
he
there
just
it
kept
is.
kind of doing it over and over and over again. And Trey got hurt, and, he eventually just kept getting better. And then ultimately Jimmy Garoppolo, who had come back, got hurt versus Miami. Brock goes in, and kind of the rest is history.
So there it is. John Lynch talking about how Brock Purdy was discovered. And the story started with an area scout, Steve Slowick, Bobby Slowick's brother. So on this day where we get the news, the 49ers have promoted one of their own, Josh Williams, to the director of scouting. I think it's important to emphasize that somebody like Brock Purdy, discovered at 262, one of the main mechanisms through which it was discovered was through a scout himself, and that was Steve Slowick. So this is really important. As I said, Spencer Coakley, one of our subscribers, said, I've got to find that comment. Here you go. Scouts are the motor oil of a franchise. I thought that was a good comment to lead things off. They indeed are, and the 49ers have made some changes at the top of that room. Good news. Gopher Baroque is back from vacation. Oh, I don't know if he considers that good news. He might be upset that his vacation is finished, and that's great. I love the fact that Gopher Baroque, who's one of our regular viewers, is back and here. So yeah, he always has really good trivia, and he poses good questions. Sometimes I'll put some on the screen. All right, let's go to the questions now. I want to talk a little bit about the scouting department. I think that these guys do deserve some shine. Want to take a look at this on a deeper level so we can go from there. Or we can talk about the coaching staff. I see a lot of Nick Sorensen talk as well, so we can go on that level as well. We can talk coaching staff. We can talk scouting department. Hell, we can talk depth chart. Ready for that as well. And while you're all here, I think that Mike just posted this. Go ahead and subscribe, because I believe we're just like dozens of subscribers away from 72,000. Yes. I think we're only like 20 away. I'm not sure. I don't have the updated count, but we're about 20 away from 72,000. So this is about to become the biggest individual 49ers YouTube channel, even though we started pretty late in the game. That's cool. We are just a few away from that milestone of 72,000. Biggest, like, I love the work that Brad does. Brad Graham, he's got a big channel. He's got over 100,000. The SF Niners. I know that our SF 49ers, that one, he's bigger on Instagram, but those guys do a good job. But as far as just like one name on a YouTube channel, I started this just talking to the camera. It's been fun just to kind of share my knowledge, share my football knowledge, share what I know from inside the building, share some of my analysis. We're almost at 72,000, and it's probably just a matter of weeks, maybe even days, when we're in that number one spot. So it's going to be cool. Yeah, Brad is a really cool guy. I met Brad already now a few times, but we did get to spend some time in at the Super Bowl, which is cool. He also met my wife at the Super Bowl over there in Las Vegas, Margot. So it was cool to talk to Brad over there. He I mean, he's a prolific content creator. This guy just sits there and just churns out content. So he does a good job, and nice guy. I know he had a hell of a time getting to Vegas. I think he ended up driving because his flight got canceled. But that was back during all that weather in the Bay Area. We started from the bottom, and now we're here. Yeah, JT Conlon. You've been here for a long time. I remember you commenting a couple years ago. Mike's met Brad too. That's awesome. I should think about this. This is a good idea. Maybe I already have been thinking about it. Let you guys know on this in a little bit. Want me to talk new defensive coordinator, assistant head coach? He's not a defensive coordinator. Oh, you want me to talk Nick Sorensen, right? I hope that because Brandon Staley is not a defensive coordinator. He's the assistant head coach, not the DC. However, it's going to be interesting because obviously Staley's going to be in on a lot of the game planning for the 49ers, because this is a really, really experienced coach. He's been a DC at the NFL level. He's been a head coach at the NFL level, and they really like his defensive mind. So you look at Brandon Staley and you see somebody who's going to help the 49ers definitely on the whiteboard. I think that he already had a lot of influence at the table as far in the player acquisition process, as far as free agency went. And as far as the draft went, we see some players the 49ers signed in free agency with some previous Brandon Staley connections. I think the larger picture is the 49ers have been trying to do the same thing for 2 years now, and they're trying to do it in a slightly different way this time because it didn't work out the way that they wanted to in 2023. But the defense needs to evolve. Any defense needs to evolve. The NFL is a game of chess. You make adjustments and counter adjustments, and you better out adjust your opponents, or else you're going to find your way toward the bottom of the league. You're not going to stay on top like the 49ers are right now if you do not adjust, because opponents are adjusting to them. So they want the defense to evolve. Kyle Shanahan recognized that this was a necessity in 2023. That's why he brought Steve Wilks in. Wilks was a differing voice, and Shanahan explained, this is how the 49ers stayed good in the 90s. My dad, Mike Shanahan, came into the Bill Walsh system under George Seifert. He was a different voice. But what the 49ers did is they made Mike Shanahan learn everything that the 49ers did already, because it was tried and true. And Mike then was able to implement his own flavor into that. There was a similar hope with how the 49ers would operate with Steve Wilks. However, I don't think the integration was quite as smooth as San Francisco wanted it to be. Kyle Shanahan ended up saying the front and the coverage were not unified in the way that he wanted them to be. So the back end did undergo, I think, an evolution under Steve Wilks. He's a DB-focused guy. But the evolution, it was just a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit with the rest of the 49ers puzzle pieces. So they let go of Steve Wilks after the season, but that did not eliminate the need for fresh blood in that defensive collection of brain power. They still needed to evolve as a defense. Shanahan said, well, what we had done prior to Steve Wilks had worked so well. We were a top 2 run defense. We were a top 5 defense consistently, maybe I need to go back to making sure that we stick to the basics. We can't reinvent the wheel to too great of a degree. So Shanahan said, all right, let's promote from within. Let's grab Nick Sorensen. There were rumors that the 49ers wanted Jeff Ulbrich, but the New York Jets would not release him from their contract. But that also tracks, right? Jeff Ulbrich fits the 49ers system. He's under Robert Saleh, who was the first 49ers defensive coordinator of this regime. That also would have marked the return to basics. So even if they did want Jeff Ulbrich, Nick Sorensen still represents a step back toward the 49ers' roots. Then, because they still recognized they needed to infuse this defense with new ideas, they needed an evolution of some of the things they did, especially on the back end, they brought in Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley, the theory is, will be able to add those new ideas from a non-defensive coordinator role. He's not going to be the play caller because last year that was too drastic of a shakeup for the 49ers. It didn't quite work. So this year they're going to have that new voice, that new experienced voice with DC and head coaching experience. They're going to have that guy be more of a whiteboard guy. Assistant head coach, that's the same job that Anthony Lynn had last 2 years. Anthony Lynn had that assistant head coach title for the 49ers, and Brandon Staley is going to have it this year. To me, it's going to be fascinating to see if that duality works for the 49ers with Sorensen in charge and Brandon Staley in that more of a holistic role. He's not only going to work with the defensive backs, even though I think he's got a lot of experience devising interesting concepts there, but he was with Vic Fangio on the Denver Broncos as an outside linebackers defensive end coach. That was several years ago before he was the Rams defensive coordinator. So I think Staley can come at this from several different angles. Go for Baroque is chiming in after his vacation with a thought. Brock Purdy needs to stay healthy all year. Kyle Shanahan has made the Super Bowl when he's had a healthy QB all year long. That's true. 2019, 2023. In 2021, they didn't have a healthy quarterback by the end of it. I really think they would have made the Super Bowl had Jimmy Garoppolo not had two injuries. He had the torn thumb ligament and a torn shoulder capsule or multiple capsules. I don't exactly know what the capsule is in the shoulder. Not going to pretend to be a medical expert, but Randy Gregory hurt Jimmy Garoppolo, the second injury. First, it was Bud Dupree against the Titans with the thumb, and then the shoulder against the Cowboys in the wild card round. But they were running on fumes, and their quarterback was hurt in 21, so they didn't make it all the way to the Super Bowl. And then their quarterback got hurt the next year with Brock Purdy going down with the elbow injury against the Philadelphia Eagles. They didn't make it. So Shanahan, with a healthy quarterback at the end, has always made it to the Super Bowl. Hasn't won the Super Bowl yet, but he's always made it to the big game. And the 49ers hope that the additions that they've made this season, here are the additions. You can see them. Rookies are in green and free agent additions are in teal. They hope that this newly fortified roster is going to be able to push them over the hump. Dominic Pooney played some center at the Senior Bowl, and he took it upon himself to play center at the Senior Bowl. He told the coaches there that he wanted to try to play center, and he stood up against some good defensive tackles down there in Mobile, in Alabama. So Pooney definitely, and that caught the 49ers' attention. In fact, Matt Barrows wrote a good article today in The Athletic. I should promote this one right now. This is with Tariq Ahmad, speaking of the 49ers scouting department. You know, Ahmad and RJ Gillen, those are two guys that have been with the 49ers for a while. They've risen all the way up to Adam Peters' former post. So Matt used to talk to Adam Peters after every draft class, and we'd publish it on The Athletic. Obviously, it's not going to do that anymore with Adam in Washington, but Tariq Ahmad has taken his place, and that is who Matt talked to for this. Tariq Ahmad on Ricky Pearsall, Isaac Guerrero, and the entire 49ers draft class, including Dominic Pooney. And one of the things that they talked about with Ahmad here is that they were impressed with Pooney playing center at the Senior Bowl. Is it just you, or does the D-line look to be better this year? Well, I mean, Armstead not being available last year for a large stretch, I think really hurt the defensive line. If you think that Malik Collins is going to be more available than Eric Armstead, well, that actually is an upgrade. It might not be an upgrade in the shortest of terms, but in the longer term it is. And if you think that Jordan Elliott's an upgrade over Javon Kinlaw, which he arguably is, I think that you could say that the inside got better. Where they definitely got stronger is at edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. Leonard Floyd has 40 sacks over the past 4 seasons. Yetur Gross-Matos gives them some needed depth. Drake Jackson, whatever they can get from him, I don't know if he's going to be on PUP. I have him as a PUP projection right now. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. It's just a projection, but he's coming off of knee surgery. I would say whatever they get from Drake Jackson is icing on the cake right now. It's gravy. It's extra. He'll be fighting for a spot in that rotation since they've beefed up the edge with Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos. So I think on paper, defensive tackle is still a concern because you're not really sure about Jordan Elliott until he actually plays in the system. And, you did lose Eric Armstead. You can't pretend that it's not a loss, but they do believe that they have some of the personnel to replace him. Do I expect any more additions with Armstead money becoming available? I don't think that any additions would be tied to that. They still have over $6 million of salary cap space as we speak right now, so they can make an addition if they find one at the right price and they so want to. The Armstead money of $18.4 million is going to free up on June 2nd, which is about 3 weeks away. When it does free up, you're going to have more to spend within the season if you want to inherit a contract via trade, which is always a possibility. Remember when they acquired Christian McCaffrey? They've been active on the trade market in every single season, except for 2018 under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. So be ready for something to potentially happen there. But remember, whatever you don't use this season carries over into 2025. And that's when you have to pay Brock Purdy and company. Go for broke, thinks like me. You did not miss the big swim is this coming Saturday. I announced it on Sunday yesterday. So this coming Saturday, we are swimming the Golden Gate. It's going to be really good. I'm a little nervous, but I think that I'm ready. So I was trying to look for that Alcatraz footage. Put that up on the screen here in a little bit because it just goes to show you how much further we're going to have to swim. I mean, this is swimming from Alcatraz. That's the Bay Bridge. As this camera kind of pans around us, you'll see where we came from last time. And this is in October. This was the day before the Cardinals game, the game where Purdy threw I think 1 incompletion all game. That was good weather. This wasn't. I mean, we were dealing with a lot of waves. The bay was treacherous that day. There's people filming us out of a boat. But you see the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. This coming Saturday, we're going to be jumping in on the opposite side of the Golden Gate Bridge at Point Bonita, the lighthouse. And we'll be swimming in on the path that you kind of see right now. We'll be swimming in through the bridge over into the city. So we're hoping for good conditions. To find those good conditions, we'll be jumping out of the small boat at 5 a.m., maybe a little bit later than that, first trace of daylight. And we'll be bringing it in, hopefully with a flood of water taking us in through the Golden Gate Bridge. So you didn't miss the swim. Thanks for checking, though. I appreciate you, Adrian. Thank you. All right. Any more questions? Let's go for it. Any more questions? And then we'll wrap the show up. So I said that this was going to be a 49ers week in review. I have to say, I'm looking at the calendar to see all that's happened this week just to get everybody firmly updated. Maybe I'll do a firm one tomorrow when I'm a little bit more organized. I know that I was on my vacation. I didn't do a week in review. I could catch you up on everything that's happened. This is big. We had the rookie mini camp on Thursday and Friday. We got to meet all of the 49ers rookies. There wasn't anything crazy that came out of it. Ricky Pearsall obviously moved really well. I thought that was one of the headlining things. Malik Mustafa was, I just physically, I was really taken aback by the ball of muscle that he is, I think that he could definitely play at one of those linebacker spots. You know, you talk about somebody like Drake Nugent, the undrafted center out of Michigan. I thought that he looked the part physically, but we don't have the pads on yet. So making any overarching declarations based on a rookie minicamp without pads is downright foolish. So that was the week in review, and you've already seen all that content. You've seen the interviews that I put up on Thursday and Friday. So make sure that you stick with going and looking at that stuff. Make sure that you go back to the draft also, and you could see some of the Zoom interviews from right after that event. It's been relatively quiet for the 49ers after the flurry of player acquisition. We will see them take the field on Tuesday, not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, May 21st, for OTAs. And that's when everybody's going to be around. Maybe not Brandon Ayuk. I wouldn't expect him to be around until a new contract is signed. I wouldn't expect him to actually practice until one is signed. But we could also see Ayuk if a contract isn't signed by June at the mandatory veteran minicamp, which is on June 4th and 5th. But anyway, if you have any more questions, put them up there. Realize I still have that Steve Slowick title at the bottom of the screen. He's the scout that discovered Brock Purdy. This is interesting. Spencer thinks that Ricky Pearsall is lighter than 190. The funny thing is that people look at 190 and they see Brandon Ayuk at over 200 and Deebo Samuel at 215 and 220, and they're like, oh, that's light. How is he going to handle the NFL? I, personally think that if he is 190, he looks a little heavier just because his base, the quads, are bigger than a typical 190 pounder. And I think that's one of the reasons why the 49ers are really intrigued by Ricky Pearsall, because he's got the movement ability of a lighter player, but he's got the toughness of a heavier player. Usually when you've got that kind of duality going on in your skill set, it's not usual. It's not normal to have that kind of duality going on. That's when you have guys picked higher in the draft because they've got a rare set of physical traits that work together. Spencer wouldn't mind if Brandon Ayuk missed OTAs. Lots of new wide receivers need reps. It's an interesting point. I mean, if you look at the room for San Francisco, it's up here. I'm highlighting it for you. If you look at the room beyond Ayuk, it's Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Ronnie Bell, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing. We saw a little bit of him during the 49ers rookie minicamp. Struggled a little bit fielding some of those punts, but he doesn't have a whole lot of experience fielding punts. So he definitely has the body type and the skill set, I think, to potentially do it. So we'll see him get more work there. We'll get to say hi to Trent Taylor again for the first time at OTAs. He's back with the 49ers. Obviously, Chris Conley. Danny Gray's already been working out for the San Francisco. And we saw Tay Martin at rookie minicamp. He was still eligible to participate. Tay was actually leading the receiver group through the drills. And I asked Jacob Cowing about that, and he said it was good to have somebody who had already been in the building for a year in Tay Martin to help just familiarize the rookies. Somebody who's been there and done that. I mean, this is a crash course. All of these guys just got drafted. They pack up their stuff. They move into the hotel. They stay at the hotel throughout the course of the summer. They're picking up the playbook. They're adapting to NFL nutrition plans, NFL workout plans, and they've got to get used to the new level of football, the professional level of football. And the fact that Tay Martin was there, somebody who's been through this already at rookie minicamp, going through the drills with the 49ers, but not just going through the on-field drills, going through meetings with the 49ers rookies, I think was valuable. And Jacob Cowing actually talked about that. Finally, I didn't mention Tariq Owens, Terrell's son, also on the 49ers now, going through all of that stuff. So it's extremely, extremely imperative for these young guys to get as much time as possible exposed to the system now. So I don't think that Spencer's thought is a terrible one. I think you would rather have Brandon Ayuk around, but even if he is around, you're probably not going to give all too much action to some of the superstars, right? This is something where you want to preserve them, preserve their bodies. And as you do that, you can give some of those younger guys a little bit more time. The Juwan before Juwan, Trent Taylor. back with the 49ers, at least on the 90-man roster. Even if Trent doesn't make the 53, he could be a good practice squad candidate now that you could call up the veterans. Really, really dependable punt returner. He didn't muff a single punt when he was with the 49ers over that long stretch of time. So that's definitely worth something, especially since it's so hard to actually attain positive yards on punt returns. I think half the battle is avoiding the negative ones on punt returns. Comical in a good way or a bad way? Are you not happy with the defensive line depth? I'd be a little bit concerned about the depth at defensive tackle. That's for sure. And even the front line at defensive tackle, they were a bad run defense last year. The 49ers were. So to me, that's a red flag. That's something they got to get fixed. And that's why I asked Nick Sorensen about it. And I don't know. I mean, his answer was really short. He's not obligated to reveal philosophical or schematic adjustments that the 49ers are making, but that is definitely a phase of the game that they're going to have to improve in. Comical in a neutral way. Yeah, yes. So you're not talking about quality, you're talking about quantity. And when you look at the defensive line room, they just cut a player, Spencer Wagee, from the DL room. They had 18 bodies in there before that. Now they've got 17. 17 defensive linemen. This is the most the 49ers have ever had. Well, 18 was the most they had, but 17 would have been the high water mark before this year. So Bosa, Collins, Hargrave, Floyd, Robert Beal, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, Yetur Gross-Matos, Kalia Davis, Drake Jackson. I'm only at 10. We still got 7 to go. Alex Barrett, Evan Anderson. That's the undrafted free agent out of Florida Atlantic. I mean, really, really big body, 326 pounds. T.Y. McGill, Austin Bryant. I have a really tough time pronouncing this name. Sam Okoyananu. I probably didn't get it right. I apologize. I'm going to have to work on that. Ernest Brown IV, who's a defensive end, even though I only had room for him in the defensive tackle cell. And Raymond Johnson. In the 49ers, they've got a lot of defensive linemen on this football team. Gopher thinks that Greenlaw will be on PUP to start the season. I think it's looking likely based on some of the talk that we've heard. I don't think that it's certain, but it's probably likely that Dre Greenlaw will indeed be on PUP. So you look at that and you see why the 49ers signed Devondre Campbell. You also see, I mean, that linebacker position is so important. And you saw it last year where I think the 49ers didn't really believe that Steve Wilkes was utilizing the linebackers properly. It is the intermediary between the front and the coverage. So when you see the front with Bosa and Collins and Hargrave and Floyd getting after the quarterback, and then you see Ward, Yidam, Diamaro Lenore, maybe a little bit of Renato Green, obviously Jair Brown, some Talanoa Hufanga, maybe some Malik Mustafa. You see those guys on the back end. They obviously have very distinct roles. The middle of the defense, the linebacker position, these guys are doing both. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, those guys are heavy in on the run defense, but they're also asked to cover a lot. If you can't cover as a linebacker in the modern NFL, you will be exposed. And the fact that Dre Greenlaw went down in the Super Bowl really hurt the 49ers. They targeted Oren Burks, who was Greenlaw's replacement effectively in that game, 9 times, and there were 9 completions for over 100 yards. So there was a fracture point there in the 49ers defense after that Achilles injury. That means that they have to be extra sure that they are stocked at linebacker behind Greenlaw to remain afloat, firing at all full cylinders defensively. Devondre Campbell was an all-pro just a couple years ago. Do I think that he's as good in coverage now as he was back then? No, I don't think so. But he knows the system. He played for Atlanta before he played for Green Bay. That was a Dan Quinn defensive system. And I think that the 49ers absolutely believe he can be a stopgap, even now at, I think he's 30 or 31 years old. Somebody like D. Winters and Jalen Graham, they need those two guys to take the next step this year. But they've also added to the room with Tatum Bethune, the rookie out of Florida State, who can hit. We'll see how well he can cover. The metrics aren't great, but I think the football acumen, I think, is something that the 49ers really, really like. So there it is. We talked 49ers scouting department. We go on a big Q&A. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Time for me to go eat. We'll talk to you very soon.